back to another episode of the show. I'm Victoria Snitsar Churchill, a political journalist and conservative commentator based in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And this is my independent project, the Freedom Shots podcast. This week, we have joining us all the way from the great state of Michigan, Bryan Posthumus, and he is a Michigan representative. He is currently in his fourth year. He was elected in 2020, been in office since 2021. So thank you so much for joining us today, Representative. If you could start off just a little bit by telling us about yourself. I think most of my audience isn't super familiar with Michigan. So just give them a little bit of a rundown about yourself, your background, and what first motivated you to run back in 2020.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on. My name is Bryan Posthumus. I'm the Republican floor leader, the majority floor leader for the House of Representatives here in Michigan. I'm a fifth generation farmer, so I grow hops for beer production, and my degree is in agricultural business management. I'm married, my wife Elizabeth, who I actually went to high school with. We have three kids, and frankly, I'm blessed to have them as part of my family. Actually, interestingly enough, I never really had any expectation of going into elected office. Even though I grew up kind of in a political family, I never wanted to run for office. But then COVID hit, and I vehemently disagreed with how Governor Whitmer handled the COVID lockdowns here in Michigan. And I found myself, speaking up about it and talking about, how it was being handled completely incorrectly. And as a result, I decided, if I'm going to complain about this, I should probably step up, run for office, and do something about it. And so that's what I did. I ran for office in 2020 during COVID and won my election. And here I am.
And if you could, do the hand, right? Michigan's the hand map. So if you could put your hand up and show us where exactly you're from, just so that people.
Is my thumb on the right side or the wrong side? Let's see. Well, so I'd be over
that
here.
Way,
I'm in Grand Rapids. There we go.
Perfect. So you're about, is that like 2 hours from Lansing about, right?
It's about an hour from Lansing. Lansing is like right in the middle.
Right,
Detroit's down here. And so I live right over here, just north of the city of Grand Rapids.
All right, perfect. Yeah, just give us a little bit of a geography lesson there.
There you go.
And so, starting off nice and easy, for those that follow my show and have followed my career really over the past decade, I'm a huge fan of the Second Amendment. I actually kind of got my start in the conservative movement and activism on Second Amendment issues almost a decade ago when I was a student in college at the University of Kansas. I was a student activist and a vocal supporter of gun rights, campus carry in particular. And I know you're pretty big on 2A issues as well. So to kind of establish some common ground, I was looking through your website and I found that you had a post about defending our rights and protecting hunting heritage. So could you kind of give us a breakdown of what that looks like in Michigan, what the tradition is, and what the threats are to that?
Absolutely. So, let's start off. Let's start off with hunting. That was a family pastime, the way that I grew up, right? Like, every deer season, November 15th, my family extended family would come to my parents' house when I was growing up, and I'd go sit in the blind with my dad, and we'd go hunting. For my 12th birthday, my birthday present when I was 12 was a shotgun that my dad gave to me, that his dad gave to him when he turned 12. And it's a family pastime here in Michigan. It truly is heritage. And I feel that way. I fundamentally agree with that. That's even outside of the fact that the Second Amendment specifically says these rights shall not be infringed. And so when we're talking about any infringement upon those rights, it's more than just heritage. It's a fundamental right that we have here in this country, and that we should have. And so, in the past, I've sponsored legislation to make Michigan a constitutional carry state. I knew that wasn't going to go anywhere because I knew that we had a pro-gun confiscation governor. And so, it was more of a symbol than it was anything else, but it's something that I believe in.
And, you bring up a constitutional carry. I don't know how much you guys are following from the state level, but nationally, we've had national constitutional carry, or excuse me, national concealed carry reciprocity. There's a distinction there for those that are in the space, but national concealed carry reciprocity introduced federally. So what would a bill like that do in a state like Michigan that actually doesn't have constitutional carry rights? I think there's about 30 now, or at either 29 or 30, I always forget. We're definitely at 29. We might be at 30 states that do recognize that right, but Michigan is not one of them because, your bill, and I'm sure similar ones have been introduced, haven't been passed. And, kind of as a conservative, I always see, what legislation do we want passed at the federal level versus what do we want to leave up to the states? And, gun rights is one of those things that, like, I feel like if we pass pro-gun legislation federally, when the anti-gunners come into power, they can use kind of that mandate to
Yeah.
decrease gun rights because we've kind of elevated that to a federal power. But what do you think the role of a state like Michigan would be if something like that is passed federally?
So, first of all, let me start by saying I'm a big proponent of the 10th Amendment and 10th Amendment rights. I feel strongly that too often the states abdicate responsibility and authority to the federal government. And so I want to be careful anytime that we're talking about doing federal legislation and federal policy in areas that should be left up to the states. So I'll start with that. But if we're talking about if we're talking about a reciprocity agreement between constitutional carry states. What that really is, I mean, that's an interstate compact, interstate commerce idea. And so maybe that is, but to me, what that means, and again, I don't know the details of the bill, but to me, what that means is that if two states independently recognize constitutional carry, then they recognize it between each of those states. So say Michigan is a constitutional carry state, say that is the case, and Ohio is a constitutional carry state, then Ohio would be required by federal law to accept the right of the constitutional of a person from Michigan to constitutionally carry. And so my assumption is that's probably fine. But again, we have to be careful that we aren't relegating authority to the federal government from the states.
Yeah, and kind of that idea is, I think, paired on a lot of issues, but you focused a lot this year on cryptocurrency. And kind of first off, just your top line thoughts. What inspired you to write this legislation, to introduce it, and why do you think it's important for Republicans to lead on the issue? Is it just because we tend to be the party of capitalism, deregulation, the free market? Are those the main reasons? Is there kind of a deeper why to this legislation?
Well, let me start by talking about the legislation itself. So I launched the first phase of a three-phase process with regard to making cryptocurrency more accepted here in Michigan, for the state of Michigan to recognize that cryptocurrency is a thing, it's here to stay. Not only that, but here in Michigan, we are open to doing business with regard to crypto. I fundamentally believe that that cryptocurrency is going to be the financial norm in the future. And so Michigan needs to be at the forefront of that movement. We led, 100 years ago, we led during the Industrial Revolution. We led in manufacturing. We led with the automobile and then office furniture. And then for a couple of decades, we just kind of let other states take the lead, other countries take the lead. This is Michigan's opportunity to step up and lead once again. And so it's my hope that here in Michigan, we become that state that when entrepreneurs in the crypto field are looking for a place to set up shop, Michigan is the first one on their mind to do that. And so that's kind of where the idea of saying, okay, what do we need to do in order to make cryptocurrency a thing here in Michigan? That's what started that premise. From a standpoint of why you start to see, throughout the entire country, more so Republicans taking the lead on these issues, and that's not exclusive, right? There are areas and Democrats that are jumping on board as well. But it goes along the lines more fundamentally with the foundational principles of conservatism: small government, deregulation, get the government out of the way. That's part and parcel with the conservative movement, and so the alignment with crypto is just kind of there naturally. But you are starting to see some of the Democrats and the more left-leaning individuals and policymakers stepping up to the plate as well.
And do you have any reservations about the abundance of cryptocurrency? I know some of the critics will go out and say that they, don't want tracking, for example, right? Because it is in the digital space and there's concerns about privacy and things like that. And again, kind of in the Second Amendment community, people have experienced debanking. There was a debate a couple years ago in DC about merchant category codes for credit card companies, which would, flag gun purchases and things like
Yep.
that. Versus, if you just go out and you buy those things cash, you don't have that fear, I guess, as much. And so kind of is that any of the pushback that you see for that community, again, even on the right?
I haven't seen that pushback. That what you're talking about is certainly an issue with regard to crypto for sure, especially on the debanking front. Like you are starting to see entrepreneurs that carry crypto, that own crypto being debanked, and that's an issue that I'm trying to look at. All right, what are steps that we can take at the state level to address debanking, both from a crypto viewpoint and then also just from a conservative viewpoint, right? Like because there are other individuals that are being debanked as a result of their conservative beliefs, and frankly, whether you hold conservative beliefs or liberal beliefs, it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't be debanked because you believe something, and you shouldn't be debanked because you hold an asset that you're legally able to hold. And so we're looking at different ways that we can address that issue specifically. That's down the road a little bit. That's probably phase 3 of our 3-phase process, but it is something that we're looking at.
And again, kind of with the idea of bringing this to the mainstream, at least in the conservative world, on the Republican side of things, Trump spoke at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville over the summer. I wasn't there, but I think actually a couple of my former coworkers from the New York Post were there when I was on the New York Post swing state team. I know we had one of our reporters go and cover it. And so, do you think there's kind of a little bit more of a mandate for Republicans to act on crypto? Do you think the Bitcoin bros had a hand in delivering Trump an electoral win? And do you think their involvement in the last election and kind of this reciprocal recognition of the importance of the issue that I think, kind of Trump gave them by actually going and speaking at their meeting? Do you think there's kind of has this kind of spurred an action for Republicans? Has this been a catalyst for people like yourself to actually tackle it at the state level?
I think it's less of a mandate and more of a recognition that as cryptocurrency gains traction and gains acceptance around the world, the United States, and then also more specifically for me, Michigan, needs to be part of that acceptance and needs to jump on board. And if we don't, we'll be left behind. And so it's just a matter of, again, it's less of a mandate and more of a, all right, this is a thing, this is happening. How do we get involved?
And on the issue of crypto, is there anything that you have seen or kind of heard about that's going on nationally, particularly in DC, that is maybe of concern that you wish that they would leave up to the states to handle with legislation similar as what you've introduced? Or is there kind of, do you think there's a role for both the federal government and state governments to play in this debate?
There's absolutely a role for both the federal government and the state government. I mean, finance is largely a federal issue. It has been for like since the founding of our country. Finance and banking, it's largely been a federal issue. But I do believe that states are going to kind of lead the way on the acceptance of it, and that's what we're trying to do here in Michigan.
And is there now, or do you see in the near future, there being kind of a hodgepodge of policies? I think that we see again on issues like the Second Amendment, on issues like marijuana, where, federal statute states one thing or guides industries in a certain direction versus states say something completely different.
So that's the beauty of our country, right? Like we have 50 individual states that have the ability to create policies that best fit their demographic, their makeup, the people that live there. And so not only that, but it can be used as a testing ground for what is the best practice. We're not, Michigan has some similarities with California, but we have very different, there's very stark differences between our state makeup and California's state makeup. And so what works best in California may not work as well here in Michigan, and vice versa. And then not to mention the other side of that is, they might want to try something different, and maybe they're a little bit more risk averse than we are here in Michigan. And so we'll be a testing ground and prove that something works. And then down the road, California may adopt that, or again, vice versa. And so that's the beauty of our country. That's one of the things that I love about it.
And are there any other states that you think are doing a good job on this that Michigan can kind of follow their example, or is your legislation more kind of in the pioneering vein where you think more people will follow what you're attempting to do?
That's a great question. So there are a lot of different states that are actively getting involved in different facets of crypto. You have Texas stepping up to the plate. You have Wisconsin stepping up, Wyoming stepping up. Several different states around the country are doing different pieces. And we're trying to pull together, all right, what are some of the things that Texas are doing well? Texas is doing a really solid job of utilizing their existing energy infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and maximizing that for the purpose of crypto. And so we're taking a page out of their playbook. Other states, like I want to say Wyoming or Wisconsin, is pioneering policies regarding DAOs. And so how does that impact what we can do here in Michigan? We're taking a page out of their playbook there. What we're doing in Michigan that I think is kind of leading the ground is we're taking all of these ideas from around the country and putting them all together to really launch something big that's inclusive of the entire industry, whether it's corporate structure or utility utilization or strategic funds. We're bringing them all together into a 3-phase project here in Michigan.
Could you expand a little bit? You mentioned DAOs for those that are unfamiliar. What is that in particular?
So that's interesting enough. That's the subject that I'm the least versed on right now. So that'll be part of phase 3 as well. But essentially, it'll be the organizational structure that allows cryptocurrency entrepreneurs to build into the LLC structure and incorporate here in Michigan.
Definitely. And so we have a mutual friend. You were recently on his podcast, James Dixon. He talks about this idea of building a wall around Michigan. The idea that Michigan has a history of being a leader and maybe not necessarily isn't that now, which inspires people to leave the state, whether they grow up here and go to college and don't come, or here for you, not for me, whether they grow up in Michigan, and they leave either for college or after college, that Michigan has, a little bit of brain drain. They are struggling to keep talent in the state is something that at least I've heard from him. Is that something that you hear? Is that something that you're concerned about? And is this kind of one of those industries that you think can actually bring people to Michigan or inspire them to stay and, have a tax base and have Michigan be thriving for the future and even kind of get back to a little bit more of its roots as a leader nationwide?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, one of the big challenges that we're facing here in Michigan is, our population is declining relative to other states around the country, specifically since Governor Whitmer took office here. We've seen, we've seen people fleeing Michigan to states like Florida and Texas and the Carolinas, and even here closer to home in the Midwest. And so the question becomes, how do we retain talent? How do we reverse that trend and start growing in respect to the rest of the nation rather than shrinking? To the point where the governor even announced a population council to try to figure out why people are leaving. You don't need a council to figure it out. It's pretty simple. We should be relying on conservative principles that have led to population growth in the past and will do it again, and currently is leading to population growth in states like Texas and Florida. So we need to make sure that we are attracting jobs here and attracting businesses here by having an inclusive and business-friendly environment, and then simultaneously taking advantage of opportunities for the future like crypto.
And I think we've hit it a little bit here and there, but I just want to, come flat out and ask kind of politically in terms of more electorally, where does this put Michigan? I think if you ask anybody right of center, they'll say the Whitmer regime has been a disaster, frankly. But, what can Republicans do? Can they come back from this? I just think back to 2016, which is, at least as far as I'm aware, before you got involved electorally, maybe you're involved kind of more on the activist realm and things like that.
Right.
But Michigan, I think nationally was seen by Republicans as kind of like the poster child, because that's actually how we got Ronna McDaniel, who used to be the Michigan GOP chair, as the RNC chair. Again, personally, I don't think she did that great of a job nationally, but kind of seeing what she did in Michigan, people were like, okay, we're going to take this blueprint and we're going to apply it and we're going to have all this great success. Again, nationally, I don't think it materialized as much, but 2026 is a huge year for Michigan. There's, the recent resignation of, or not resignation, but saying that he's not going to seek re-election of Gary Peters.
Yeah.
And then obviously you guys just had a Senate race. You'll have a governor's race. Seems like there's a lot on the table. What's kind of your insight on that? And again, what is the interplay between policy making and politics, and where does that put Michigan in the future?
So I would say, first of all, let's start by saying I believe that Michigan is the most important state electorally for the 2026 election cycle. Hands down, unquestionable. We are a purple seat that has an open race for governor, U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, the House of Representatives, which Republicans regained control this past election cycle. That's up again. The state Senate, where Democrats took control in 2022 for the first time in 40 years. That's up for grabs again. So Michigan is going to be the epicenter of the 2026 election cycle, and so it's critically important that not only do we get our things together and our ducks in a row electorally from a campaign perspective, but we also have to deliver for the voters of Michigan, both at the federal level and here at the state level. And if we do all those things and then we get my constitutional amendment on the ballot to ensure that only citizens vote in our elections, I think we'll be well positioned.
And, as you mentioned, the Republicans actually have a control of the Michigan House right now. You're currently a member of the House leadership. So do you kind of see your role as, showing Michigan what Republicans in power can look like, saying, you've given us this, it used to be a trifecta. You've given us a little bit of power. This is what we can do with it. And then, hopefully at the end, give us more and elect more of us to do more great things.
Yeah, so when we first launched our campaign to take back the House of Representatives over the summer, I worked on developing kind of our platform, our campaign platform, which was our mission for Michigan, the 10 things that we are going to commit to doing in order to ensure Michigan is a better place to work, live, and raise a family, assuming the voters of Michigan gave us the gavel back here in the House. And so now that we got the gavel back, our job is to deliver on that commitment. And if we do that, then I think the voters here in Michigan will trust us by giving us control of the Senate.
And, I'm sure that in turn can lead to, people that are your colleagues or maybe even yourself that eventually want to seek higher office again, saying, I was part of this coalition that was part of this kind of governance in Michigan and, elect me to seek higher office and things like that. Do you personally have any plans to seek higher office, or are you happy where you're at right now in the state house?
We'll see, if as you probably know, politics is all about timing and opportunity when it presents itself. Right now, I don't know what opportunities there are, but I'm very happy in my role as the majority floor leader here in the House of Representatives, and I want to make sure that we deliver results for the people of Michigan.
Well, do you have anything that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure we hit before we hop off?
I think we're good right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time. Where can people keep up with you and what you're doing for the people of the great state of Michigan in the coming months, weeks, and years?
Probably the best way to follow me is just with social media. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Just look me up there. I have campaign accounts and I have official accounts. So just look up Bryan Posthumus on any of the social media, digital media. That's Bryan, and it's Posthumus, and you'll be able to find me on any of the main accounts.
Well, thank you again so much for your time. We'll let you get back to work and hopefully we will chat again in the future.
All right. Thank you very much.
To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. That was Rep. Bryan Posthumus from Michigan, State Representative, and be sure to catch our episode next week.